Welcome back to Glasp Talk. Today, we have the pleasure of speaking with Bosky Mukherjee, an inspiring leader in the tech world. And Bosky is the founder and CEO of PMDojo, a platform dedicated to empowering product managers and leaders to drive impact at scale. And with over 2 decades of experience across startups and major companies like Atlassian, Bosky has been a trailblazer, not just in product leadership, but also an immigrant founder and also a woman navigating the challenging landscapes of business and tech. So in today's talk, we'd like to explore her journey as an immigrant founder, the unique challenges and opportunities of being a woman in product, business, and startups, and also her mission to help women and minorities future-proof their careers. Thank you for joining Bosky today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So first of all, I know you started PMDojo like almost 6 years ago, back in 2019, but we are curious, why did you start PMDojo at the time? And also why PM product manager and why Dojo? Dojo is kind of Japanese word, right? And we want to know the backstory of PMDojo.
Yeah, absolutely. No, thank you for inviting me. And that was a fabulous introduction. I don't think I would have been able to say that because I would have been so worried and conscious of that introduction. So thank you for giving a lovely introduction. So yeah, I started PMDojo 2019. And I was at a point in my career where I was leading a business. So I moved out of product. I was promoted as the president and GM of a mid-sized tech company, SaaS-based company. And from the outside, everything was really awesome and really great. Everything was perfect. I had kind of reached the top. But I think I was also at a point where I started questioning a lot of things, right? What am I going to be doing? How am I going to make an impact? I was also a mom, and my son was very little. He was very young. He was only 3 years old. And so I think motherhood changes a lot of the things. And I think I was also becoming a little bit more mature, and I started asking a lot of these questions. And as I was mentoring a lot of people just outside of my work, which I've always done over the years, I was beginning to notice a few things. And I was really getting increasingly frustrated. So, number one, every single company that I talked to wanted diverse talent, but everybody talked about how the problem is a pipeline problem, right? And I never understood that because if I would look around me, I couldn't see the pipeline problem. There were people who looked different from everyone else sitting in the executive room. And so I couldn't understand why the hell is it a pipeline problem? So I think that frustrated me and I wanted to do something to solve it. And I knew I couldn't solve it if I was part of one company. I had to do it externally, outside of one company. Otherwise, it would be very, very slow. The second thing that I started noticing as I was at that point was a lot of the people that I was mentoring obviously were in the product field. That's my background, over 23 years of being in product. And they were going, so if there were people who were looking to transition into product, because it's still a very hot field, they were going and learning and taking up all of these different courses. And I'm not going to say anything bad about them, but all of these existing courses, they were only learning theory. But the reality of how products get built is very different, right? Because at the end of the day, you're working with people and it's not just about slapping frameworks and theory and a formula and bingo, the product gets built. It's very, very messy and it's very hard. And so a lot of the human skills are never taught. And that piece was missing. And it was very frustrating to see that, people would go and spend up thousands and thousands of dollars and then they would still be stuck and not be able to transition because I also knew as a hiring manager that I didn't necessarily look at certifications or courses as a proxy whether someone can do the job. So this was for transitioners. And then for experienced product managers and leaders, it was the same thing. I think a lot of folks would go in and learn from case studies, or Spotify is doing this and Amazon is doing this. But then they were working in companies that were not Spotify or not Amazon, and you couldn't just bring a framework and just slap it into your company and say, bingo, everything's working. If that was the case, then I would say all the tech teams would be singing Kumbaya and eating marshmallows by the fire pit, right? But it's a very conflicting role. There's conflicts every single day when you're trying to build products. There are disagreements. You reach home and you're with headache, and you're constantly trying to like make things work with people and influence and making those right decisions and things like that. And so a lot of these things I started questioning, and I was like, how do I solve this? Right? This is obviously a problem at scale. It's not just one or two. There is a market for it. How do I solve it? And so I was like, okay, I'm going to do this outside of a company. I'm going to try to really support more women and minorities, because I do want to see them higher up. That's how we are going to be able to change the tech industry to, make this world better and do something for humanity. But I also want to tackle the human skills. And I also want to do this in a way where people are really learning from a common sense as opposed to framework and equation. Like, we are not working in a factory to make widgets, right? That's not how product management happens. And so, yeah, I left my role as the president, and I had a chat with my husband financially. What does that mean before I do this? And because I was an immigrant, right? I think, we didn't come to North America with a whole bunch of generational wealth or anything. So it becomes a very crazy decision to be thinking as a, especially when you have mortgage and family and all of this, and Vancouver is an expensive city. So yeah, I think it's a long way, rounded way of saying that I had a conversation with my husband. He's extremely nice. He said, why don't you try what you want to do? Give yourself a time box like you've always done and figure it out. And I think that was like a huge piece, I think, of confidence. And I asked him, I said, are we going to be okay financially? So he said, that's why I'm asking you to time box and figure it out. And so, yeah, I gave myself 3 months. I said, if I'm going to do something, before trying to go back into the workforce and start applying for jobs, I'm going to give myself 3 months, and I'm going to prove a profitable business model, and I'm going to see if that works. And so this is how PMDojo was born. And from a name perspective, I wanted to do something which really helps with a product mindset. And that's how the PM piece came in, not so much for product management, but the product mindset. And then I was talking with my husband, and he was like, what do you think about the vision? And I'm like, it's this sacred place, because for me, building a product is like a craft. And I've always considered kind of it to be sacred. And he's like, it's the sacred place, like this martial arts thing, and of course, we both are from product. We went into mind mapping and we started doing these things. And then my husband said, I bought a domain. It's called PMDojo. And I'm like, what? I'm like, okay. He's like, you are on a timeline. You only have 3 months. So domain is done. Now go and figure it out. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to figure, and I'm going to focus on the actual program and the product. The logo and the branding and the website can come later. But that's really how I think it was the vision of it being like a sacred place where you're learning the craft and building this craft and getting better. And I think the martial arts, the Japanese annotation, I think fit in somewhat, which is what I think my husband thought of. And that's how we are here 6 years later.
Wow, really impressive. And yeah, really great name. I love the name. Yeah, PMDojo. That's a great name.
Thank you.
And now the PMDojo is really popular and famous now for among product managers. But how you set the 3 months as your first timeline, but how did PMDojo grow over time? What did you do? Or I mean, there are some, I think, competitors or similar service communities, I think, at the time. So how did you do differently from others?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. So I think so I took 3 months to launch our first, and we launched with a very specific program. So very true, like a product, I niched in, and we launched our MVP, and the MVP was a product accelerator program, and there was nothing like that. But within 2 weeks, the name product accelerator just caught on so much fire that I saw there were at least 10 other people who started naming their programs product accelerator. Like, I have been in panel talks and I've been talking about the journey of PMDojo, and especially the product accelerator program, which helps people transition into product. And other people in the room have actually gone and updated their website and changed their program name into product accelerators. I wish I had trademarked it, but I didn't. I think it just helps me give me free press, when people search for product accelerator and they see PMDojo. So yeah, I think the first version was very bare bones. I already had a lot of the content from coaching my own product managers, right, as I've led the team. So I used to do a lot of education internally for my teams. And I've always been a firm believer of learn by doing. You can learn theory, but unless and until you get your hands dirty and you actually get into the pick of it and the drama of it, you really don't learn. Otherwise, everything sounds great. And so I used a lot of those materials. And the first version of the product accelerator or PMDojo, actually the second version, I'll tell you the story of the first version, was really a 5-week program for people to kind of really get their hands dirty and work together in small teams and stop at the prototype stage, but an interactive prototype stage, present, learn, and we still had the hard skills as well as the human skills. So, that is how the first one was born in terms of getting the students enrolled. I still don't do any paid marketing. So everything is organic.
Oh. Wow.
There is no paid marketing because, I would much rather take the revenue and put it back into scholarship pool. So that's how I do. And so yeah, I don't. And I think morally, it's somehow paid marketing just doesn't sit well with me, like paid and influencer marketing. I don't know. I might be foolish here, but that's just, I think I have a morality clash with that. And so I've not done, even in companies where I've been an executive, I've actually slashed inorganic paid marketing budgets. So yeah, I think the first version was interesting. I never had any intention of running it as a product accelerator program or anything. I actually took a lot of my resources that I had and I was like, okay, as I'm trying to figure this piece out, I'm just going to take some of these resources that I have and the questions that I typically get asked a lot of the times where people are asking, can I book some coffee chat with you? I was like, if I want to do this in scale, I'm going to take some of those resources, arrange it in a nice LMS, and I'll just make it freely available. And so that was the first version, which I did in 3 weeks or 2 weeks. So it was a sprint that I ran. And I launched the website. It was ugly like hell, but it essentially had a list of, I think, about 1,500 resources over the years that I had for PMs and designers. And within 48 hours, we had roughly like 8,000 people. And all I did was a LinkedIn post. That's it. I said, hey, this is something I'm sharing, some of my most recommended resources. It's freely available. If you want, take it. If you want to share it. That's it. Within 48, like I had to then start upgrading the LMS to even allow that many users. And I'm like, okay, that's a little cost. Fine, I'll take it. That's not a problem. And then in about another month or so, I started getting a lot of questions like, how do I put this into practice? Like, I need examples. I need this. And I'm like, okay, this is becoming a lot of work. Like, I can't just be doing that. Like, what was the point? And that is how the accelerator came into being. So that was the next version. And then the accelerator came in and we started getting tons of success. Like we have a 96% success rate of people transitioning into product from, fields such as actors and dentists, X-ray technician, teachers, nurses, and of course, engineers, marketers, BAs, project managers, all of that. And so even in this market, right, like this crazy market, and these people then, after not only making a transition, they started also getting promoted. So that was interesting. And then they needed a different kind of help. They're like, okay, I'm trying to have a promotion conversation. How do I have that? I'm like, okay, so I started helping them, as part of an alumni. And I'm like, this is not working. Like, I can't scale. And so that's when I said, okay, so I'm going to launch my coaching side of PMDojo. And so that was the next piece that got launched a year and a half later. So that's how PMDojo kind of grew. Everything's still word of mouth. I'm still killing programs and launching new things. And so now we have the coaching and we have Trailblazer, which is a very unique program for women founders. And then we have coaching program on the side. And then, of course, we have the accelerator.
Really impressive. Yeah. Thank you for sharing it. And so you mentioned that you're running PMDojo for 6 years now, but do you know how many people graduated the course?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say it is so different programs, right? Across the different programs, I would say we are right now sitting at probably 1,800 plus. Um,
Yeah.
and we don't accept everyone. So like the accelerator program, we typically get anywhere between 1,100, 1,500 applications every cohort, and we only do 3, 4 cohorts a year. But we keep the cohorts really, really small because this is a different way of learning. It's not like you just watch videos, and you really need to be gung-ho in saying, okay, I'm going to put in the effort. I'm going to actually build on the product. I'm okay to deal with conflict. I'm okay to be proven wrong. And so we do interviews and all of this. And so we only accept like 1 to 2% of the total applications. So yeah, right now it's about 1,800. And then also with coaching, I only work with 1 or 2 folks every quarter. And then I also work with companies where I'm training their product team. So that's taking a lot of my time. So I do very little coaching.
I see. By the way, do you interview people, candidates, to accept your accelerator? What kind of
Yes.
traits do you seek in the person? If they have a product mindset already, or if they are flexible or open-minded, do you have some criteria, or is that your gut feeling? I don't know, like, how do you
It's
have
a
some
really great
criteria? Yeah.
question. So the first round is done by my team, and then I do the second round. So yes, there is an interview. I also interview even everyone that I'm going to be working one-on-one with coaching. I also interview companies, and it has taken me, I think, 2.5 years to actually say no. Like, no, I don't think this is a fit. Like, especially even companies, I'm going to say, no, I don't think this is a fit. I think I've become a lot more comfortable because obviously with company, there is more money involved. And so I think in the beginning of being an entrepreneur and a bootstrap founder, it was hard to say no to cash that is sitting there.
Yes.
Someone's ready to pay you thousands and thousands of dollars. And you're like, no, I don't want to work with you. I think now I'm a lot more comfortable. So yes, I think to answer your question, I use my own experience as a hiring manager. So of course there are going to be questions that I'm asking. And, if someone is looking to transition, I cannot ask them product mindset because they wouldn't have. So it's no point trying to do that, right? But what I'm looking for though are things like curiosity. I am looking for something, are they coachable? So to your point, are they flexible? Do they have a point of view on things? But at the same time, how flexible are they to be proven wrong? It could be about, you know, what do they believe that, why do they believe that they want to make any shift right now in their career, right? So a lot of times people will say, I want to get into product because I want to make an impact. And so my question would be, why do you think you're not able to make an impact as an engineer? It's a valid question. Or why do you think you're not able to make an impact as a marketer? I mean, if you're not able to make an impact in the business, then you wouldn't have a job right now, right? Plain and simple. So why do you think you can make an impact? And so I really try to kind of dig deep into finding that. I also want, and I also try to ask, and I ask open-ended questions, right? Because I think as humans, I think we are terrible in answering what politically or accurately we should be answering, right? So we answer things the way we should answer, but then we do things totally different. So I really want to try to get into the behavior part. that came, after I led a team of behavioral scientists many years ago, and I started kind of really unpacking this behavior science bit. And I think it really changed how I think about a lot of things. And so I think for me, I really try to get into the deeper level of their whys to understand. And I think for me, another thing that I look for is, are they looking for just a short-term transaction where I'm going to do this program and then I'm going to hopefully make that transition happen and that's it? Or I'm going to really, am I someone who's looking to also invest in that community behind PMDojo? And for me, that is really, really important. I don't think transaction gets you too far in the tech industry. Like, no, I think it's still a very small world where people know each other. And yeah, being a jerk doesn't get you anywhere.
Totally makes sense. Yes. But so yeah, do you have any like like
term, so you can like spend with like candidate, because like if like behavior part is important, so how do you know it? So like
How do I know?
yeah,
So I
because
think,
like if you talk 30 minutes, so you understand their behavior, or like you need to spend 1 week or something so to work with or something.
no, I don't think I spend 1 week. I think, these conversations can go anywhere between 30 to 45 minutes. I think if you are attentive enough and you ask open-ended questions and then you probe, I think you can get a lot from talking to a
Okay.
person. Um, I don't ask things like, I'll never ask things like, do you consider yourself to be a collaborative person? So that's a binary question. Everyone will say, yeah, of course I'm collaborative. I've collaborated with teams. Everyone works with someone. These days, no one works
Mm.
alone.
Yeah.
So I mean, I will not ask that, right? I'm gonna really try to ask how they have dealt with X. Can they give an example? And I think just interviewing for more than 12 years, like it's so easy to catch, when things are
Mm.
not connecting and your
Yeah.
stories are not connecting. You're saying one and like three questions ago, and then now you've changed your story. And then I will catch you and say, okay, like, can you tell me what changed between that and this? As people, as humans, we change. So I might have approached something in one way, and then maybe over the course of time, I've unlearned something and I've done it in a different way. And typically, I think in PMDojo, I'm fortunate enough that a lot of the times people come as referrals. And so I will have a source where I can kind of go and say, okay, tell me a little bit about, this particular person. Like, why would you recommend this person to join? So I think it's, have I made 100% accurate, correct decisions and I've never repented giving someone a spot? No, I have made mistakes. Um, but I've also, I think at that point, like dealt with it. I'm like, okay, I'm going to try my level best to coach them along the way. I still have good relationships with them, but I think usually I would say 8 out of 10 times they have been right decisions, right? So I think I go with a little bit of gut, a little bit of instinct. I don't know how to else to describe it, but then I think you ask these probing questions and then you somehow are able to make a judgment call whether this is going to be a fit. I'll give you an example, right? And this is a really simple example. I'd ask someone what is their learning style? How best do they learn?
Mm. Like, mm.
Right? And they didn't know much about the program. So I didn't tell them anything about the program apart from what's there on the website. But I asked them how best have they learned in the past? And they said, I learned the best when I can read everything and I can underline and I'm actually working on my own and I'm able to figure it out. I'm doing all of these exercises. And then I asked more questions. It became pretty clear that this individual was a solo learner, not a team learner, right? And so I was like, okay, so that's interesting. Is this something that we can coach you out of it for certain situations? Or is this something that's going to become a barrier in your learning experience that's going to not set you up for success? So I think there are things like that that you can ask to figure out if they would be a right fit.
Interesting. Wow. Yeah, great, yeah,
Mm.
question. And so, and also when they, are about to graduate your program, do you help them to, how to say, get some interviews or so? I mean, like, do you have a pipelines to companies or startups so that, you can, connect them, or how do you help, like
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah,
applicants?
yeah. Absolutely. So it depends on the different programs, right? So for the accelerator, this is specifically for people who are looking to transition into product management. And so there are several resources that are available in the PMDojo program. Some of it starts right from the very beginning, which is around resume. How do you interview? And so we do have hiring managers and myself in the tech industry who are hosting these workshops, and there are tons of resources that are available. We also have jobs that are latest and greatest, that like just hot, just on the market, that have been there, that are available within the community for folks. I always tell folks, if you're looking for a guarantee, then that's not going to happen. This is not a right fit, because I don't think any program should guarantee a job, because no one is sitting with the budget of a company and hiring in that company. So I don't think any program morally and ethically should be guaranteeing a job, regardless of how good or bad the market is. And so I don't make any of those claims. But for some of the students who have done really, really well, I also make introductions. So I'm pretty well connected in the tech industry all around the globe. And so primarily in the Bay Area, but I would also say that all around I've made connections and introductions for folks in UK to UAE to Singapore and Hong Kong, India, you name it. And so that becomes a really good place because a lot of people who are looking to make transitions, they also don't have the network. So that kind of opens up the network. And then there are lots of skills that they learn from LinkedIn to how do you speak your elevator pitch to how do you hyper network or network. I think people get networking really wrong as well. Like it's a very short term. I'm going to give in my LinkedIn connection and I'm going to straight away send you my resume. That's not how you get a job. So that's the resources that you get as part of from a product accelerator program. And then you also have a lifelong community, right? We also have peer coaching circles that happen twice a month where you can join in and you can ask questions to peers. So that becomes lifelong available to you. For people that I'm coaching, there are other resources that are available. I advise companies, and so a lot of time the companies are looking to hire, and before a job even gets posted, they're like, hey, do you know anyone? Of course, I'm going to go to people in my community and make the connections happen. And that way folks are able to cut short like 2-3 rounds of interviews. And so that's been kind of amazing.
Amazing. And regarding the, you tapped on, like immigrants and also immigrant product manager founder and also women in tech. And they have some issue networking and so on, getting into network and so on. And I'm curious, you were also the immigrant founder and also woman in tech, right? And you moved into the Bay Area, right? Then you need to network and get the job, and also, as a founder, you should do business at the same time. So how did you, in your case, how did you overcome or the challenge, or what kind of challenges you faced, and how did you overcome that?
Yeah. I mean, there were lots of challenges. I think anytime you move to a new place, you don't know people. So I think that just comes with it. And so then how do you then start getting to know people? So that's just one challenge. And I like even lived in Bermuda, which is the teeny tiny island off the east coast of US for 3.5 years. I've had to do this multiple times, right? Like I grew up in India, left India to come to the US as a student 25 years ago. And that needed to build a relationship. And I was in goddamn Montana in Bozeman, which is, there was no one who looked like me, frankly speaking. It was a sport college town. That's another story as to how I landed up in Bozeman. Happy to talk about it. Whether there was a right decision, wrong decision. But so I think I've had to kind of rebuild that. And as an introvert, that has been hard for me. That has got nothing to do with being a woman. This has got nothing to do with whether I'm an immigrant or not. That's just who I am. Like, I would much rather just sit with a book and a blanket and my dog. That's going to make me very happy. But being in a room and having to talk to strangers and people, that just makes me exhausted. But over the years, I've had to also build the muscle, because if I started leading a team, if I had to go and present in front of the board, if I had to go and present, the company in events and things, I've had to build that muscle and I've learned how to cope with it. And so that is something over the years I've had to do. But to answer your question, like, so yes, when we moved here, I think one of the biggest challenges for me was, so Bay Area, I don't know how you both feel about it, but Bay Area is very inviting. And you can send a message to people, random people. And sometimes, a lot of the times you're going to get a yes, right? You'll be like, okay, let's just talk it out. So that's the vibe of this place, this magical place. And I think that is responsible for a lot of the good that has happened coming out of here. So I don't deny it. But I think for me, one of the hardest things that I found this year was a lot of those inner circles that we have. I have learned that they happen in people's homes in their dining tables. So there are these cliques that are there. So if you, like, for regular networking, it's fine. It's very inviting. But there is an inner circle. And it's really hard to get into that inner circle if you haven't lived here, if you don't have similar lived experiences, if you didn't start out at the same time, if you haven't worked at similar companies, maybe your kids haven't gone to school together, which is my case. And so that was really, really hard. Like, you just don't enter into someone's dining room. That's very personal space, right? So I think that was like a really interesting challenge to figure out, like, how do I get into that inner circle? And of course, I knew a lot of people here from years of, because I lived here also. But I think just getting into that inner circle was hard. And so for me, I've always believed that I can vent and complain about something, or I can think about figuring it out. I've got only two choices: either complain or try to solve. And so I complained a lot to my husband, a lot. And my husband reminded me again, and he said, "What are you going to do about it? You can complain, but you're not going to move an inch. You're going to remain in the same place and you're going to just be miserable. So what are you going to do about it?" So I think that figuring out this thing that I have had since I was a kid, I think it's come in very handy. And so what I did was that I'm like, okay, if I cannot be invited to someone's dining room, I'm going to invite others to my dining room. That's it. And so I started hosting, I started hosting intimate dinners, especially like if I want to support women, I want to support immigrants, I want to support founders who perhaps haven't lived here and, don't have all of those privileges of folks from here. Then I've kind of created those events myself and really taken a lot of effort in designing those, just like a PM would. And because I'm an introvert, I also don't do well in these large gatherings. I've done very intimate ones, like small, because I also live in the Bay Area. I don't have a massive mansion. I'm not a billionaire. And so I need to fit people in my home. And so, 12 people, 15 people, I do an excessive vetting process there so that these experiences can be curated. And so, I've done like trailblazer dinners. I've done a chai party. Like, chai is something very, very homely, thing of every Indian or Southeast Asian family. And so when I first moved here, I was missing something that I grew up, my mom would do it, and so I was like, fine, I'm going to do a chai party. That doesn't happen here. And so we had like so many folks who were interested. And so that's something that I do. So I always tell people, right? Like, like which events, like, I don't know which events, like I can't go there because that's only for specific people. I'm like, what's stopping you from creating your own? And they're like, well, I don't know who's going to join. And I'm like, well, you define your target audience, just like building a 0 to 1 product. And now you got to promote. And so post it out there on LinkedIn and post it there on Twitter. If you want to ask favors, share it with people and say, hey, can you share this with anyone who might be interested? Like, there's so many ways to solve it. So I've done that, and I think that has helped. And I think, as a mom, I cannot attend a lot of these networking events in the Bay Area that happen from 6 to 10 o'clock. Just won't work. I've got breakfast to make next day. I've got to get the dinner, and I've got to get my son to sleep at a decent time. It just won't happen. And so again, I can mope and complain and regret about my life, or I can accept and do what I can. And so I think that's just been, my mentality and how I think about it over, since I was a kid. So I do things that are in my control. Otherwise, it's going to make me a very miserable person.
Nice. Yeah, thank you for sharing. And at the same time, in career perspective, there is a word, grass seeding, right? So at a certain point, you can get promoted, but after that, it's really hard to get promoted after a certain threshold. And so what do you think about that grass seeding, and how, as a immigrant founder or, a woman in tech, and have you seen these things in real life, or at some companies, or someone struggling with that? And
it's a great question. So I used to think about that a lot, because I think, we get told this a lot from the time we enter the workforce, that there is this glass ceiling, and it's really, really hard. And obviously, you don't see a lot of women in those very senior leadership roles. Like if you go to any company's executive team, maybe there's going to be one or two women, and there's most likely that one woman is going to be the people, chief people officer or the head of HR or head of people. But if you look at tech or this and that, most of them are going to be men. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. That's just the mathematics and the broader context of how we are working, right? I cannot change that. I can do my bit to change it by hiring more women and creating a more supportive environment that makes it easier for women to stay in the workforce even after they have kids, because that's one crucial juncture where a lot of women leave, right? But I can't change that. And so I think it's really been about, thinking about, okay, so this glass ceiling and all of these things that are told. And I used to really do everything to actually shatter that glass ceiling, because I put so much pressure on myself that if I have to prove that I'm a successful woman, then I have to shatter that glass ceiling. And I did it because I went all the way up to being a president GM. That was the highest level role. I moved out of product and I was leading the entire business, engineering, sales, marketing, customer, everything. And I turned around the business from not making money to actually being profitable without firing anyone, right? So it was a lot of product innovation, a lot of premium functionalities where we could charge extra. It was looking at the price and how do we increase it and what should that model look like. It was about looking at the professional development, like some other professional programs within the enterprise offering. So a lot of this was done without firing anyone, like layoff, right? Of course, there were a few folks that had to be just from a performance management standpoint. I'm not counting that as a layoff. But I also think that after I did that, I asked a lot of questions. Like I was miserable at that point in time because I was like, okay, what have I become? I'm not saying that you shouldn't. If you're a woman, you shouldn't go and break that glass ceiling. But I also think there's a lot of that pressure. So maybe a better question to ask, this is what I do when I'm coaching a lot of women. And if someone says, I want to move up, and I'm like, why? And they're like, well, the only way to move up is to start managing people. And I'm like, not necessarily. You know that in a lot of companies, you can also move up in the IC path. This is what it might look like. And maybe in your company that doesn't have, but why do you want to manage people? So I think it's really, really important, because I think just the way traditional management and leadership track is, that's not how it is. I think work is changing, your career is changing. You may end up pausing. It might be totally okay to take a step down. I think for me, I think it's more important to solve harder and harder and harder problems. And there are tons in companies where we work with. And then, yes, if you want to rise up and you want to get into the C-level suite, awesome. But it's also okay sometimes to take a different route. And it's also, I think, to understand what is it that you really want, right? Moving up, is that going to make you happy? So what are your non-negotiables in life and career? How does that match with what kind of opportunities are there? Are you in a position financially to just kind of leave your work and just become I think that a lot of people talk about like leave 9 to 5, ditch 9 to 5. I mean, in tech, there is no 9 to 5, but just kind of saying ditch 9 to 5 and just become an entrepreneur. And then you're going to live a life where, you'll have mental health and and I'm like, I don't know if I have like all of that luxury. I am working more than what I used to while I was working at corporate. But yeah, there is more happiness, there's more joy, but you might be in a place where maybe having the next month's salary is crucial to putting food on the table for your family. Can you just leave everything and just be like, sure, So I think it's really, you have to be really intentional about, I think, a lot of this advice that's out there, and ask yourself, like, is it important to break the glass ceiling? Sure, there is that thing that exists, but is that what you want? Why do you want it? What type of work that you really want to do? Is that something that's going to happen if you do end up in a C-suite, or can you do that outside of C-suite? How else can you fill your cup? If this is the type of work you want to do and that is not available, in your company and you're not ready to leave the company because of whatever XYZ, then can you fill that cup through something else? Right? So I think it's about, it's about how do you solve the problem? It's like a how might we exercise that we do, right? You can solve the same problem in 10 different ways and then figuring out. But I think, yes, to your question, the glass ceiling exists. There is also the broken rung where to get to that first manager position, it's really hard for women, especially women, because there is data, unfortunately, that shows that when men are promoted, they are promoted, this is average largely, they're promoted based on their what they have done, what they have accomplished. Oh, sorry, based on their potential. And women are never promoted based on their potential. They have to prove. And so how do you prove if you're not in the role? So there is this inherent bias that's there. And this is what is the broken rung where it makes really hard for women to get into that first leadership role. And then when they have kids, they take some time off and then they really struggle to get back. They've already lost. And then there is also data in terms of how women's earning potential decreases once they become a mom. And that's why you have the phrase called motherhood penalty, which is a really ironic phrase here, of how it pushes, like society tends to push women back. And then, they kind of really struggle. I think emotionally, it's a big roller coaster as well. So all of these, I think, along with everything else, is not set up to help women. But again, I think there are things that you can do. And that's where I think I work with women. There are other people who are supporting women, and same thing with minorities as well.
It's a really, really important point, I think, yes. And do you think as a society or government, can they support this, or is it a different topic?
Sorry, support more women?
Women, or let's say as you mentioned, like a motherhood, let's say now they need to have like some maternity leave and to give a birth for sure. Then but they may have a gap during that time, right? So somehow they need to fill in the gap, and when they really want to come back to the
absolutely. I think we all have a role in this, right? So I'll talk about a few different things. Some of it is, I think, fairly simple, and we have that in our control, right? So I'll give a simple example. I think there are a lot of young women, as an example. They don't even have kids. They don't even have boyfriends right now, but they're already fearful of the fact that their career is going to slow down once they have kids. So that is the level of conditioning that we're talking about, right? And this has got nothing to do with, again, an immigrant. Like, this is just what it is. We also live in a country, for all its glory and all the opportunities, it's got an interesting healthcare system. Like in Canada, you had 18 months of leave after you give birth, and you could divide that up between you and your spouse. 18 months is good enough where your kid has transitioned into solids. Some babies would have also done their, out of their diapers. They've gone to probably preschool or started that process. Maybe they're also sleeping more regularly. You don't have to wake up every 20 minutes to feed and clean the diaper, right? You're not a zombie, essentially. In US, you have 12 weeks if you've given birth. I believe this still exists, at least in California, and 16 weeks if you've had a C-section, right? 12 weeks, you're still a zombie. Like, I remember my son would wake up every few minutes until he was like 2 years. And I couldn't sleep. I still had to get back to work and things like that. But I'm just thinking, like, in 12 weeks, that how do you, right? And then, if you think about 12 weeks, then you're also then transitioning from breast milk or whatever the form, like whatever the feeding thing is. Everything changes, right? So then it kind of completely changes what, how maybe a different course would be. So there are countries that actually have amazing support for mothers, right? To be returning back when I think the babies are a little bit more self-sufficient. I don't think kids ever are self-sufficient. Like my kid is 9 years old now, but I mean, I don't have to chop off all the fruits when he comes from school, right? Like before, I would have to like chop the grapes and remove the skin. I don't have to do all of that. You know, he can wash the grapes and fruits, but I still have to be there for him, right? Like I don't think kids ever become self-sufficient. Or maybe this is a little bit of cultural piece too. Like I come from Indian culture, and I think Asian culture, the care is kind of different culturally. We are just, you know, that's what I've seen in my family, and that's what a bit of it I try to imbue. So I think that's a piece that I think as government we can do. I think the second piece is around childcare. So that's another piece that's really interesting, right? Like just look at the politics and the conversation that is happening around childcare in this country, especially with the elections. It's a big problem. I struggled with finding a nanny, and it's regardless of whether I financially was able to do it. And then, of course, there's a big financial piece too, right? That you have to think about, is this affordable or not? I mean, this was a big debate even in Canada with affordable childcare, because it's not, at least in Vancouver where I lived, it's not affordable. It's a big chunk of money that you have to spend. But that's again a trade-off that some families make. We decided to use that for a couple of years when I had to return back to work, but many families cannot. So I think there is a childcare, and that's definitely where governments can. But I think when it comes to mat leave, it's a combination of government and the company's policy. I also think that as companies, we can encourage a little bit more of gradual entry for mothers, right? So I know I used to fight a lot for a lot of the PMs in my team and designers in my team who became mothers, and they would often struggle with, I don't know if I'm ready to return 5 days a week. And we're talking pre-pandemic days where people had to come to the office, right? Remote work looked very different. Like it meant sick day, and working from home was 1 day in every few months. It wasn't like what we are right now. And so a lot of moms used to really struggle with that. And so it was just easier to leave because emotionally, yeah, and just it was just hard, dynamic. You know, we can talk all we want about the role of the two partners, but a lot of the times, unfortunately, kids still go to their moms when they fall sick, right? In different families are different, but I'm just saying that on an average. So I think, you know, I used to design gradual return, and I had to fight a lot with my boss, like my CEO and the executive team. I'm like, no, you know, we can do like half a day once a week and see how that goes. And then we'll gradually increase that to maybe 1 day a week in the office. And you know, maybe we need to kind of do this more on, you know, just start working from home. And then if we do have an important meeting, then come to the office, right? So I think that gradual entry can be something that companies can definitely do and leaders can do. I think there are other things that you can do where you make it very, very obvious and normalize that, you know what, if you want to take lesser responsibilities, that's okay. I don't think a lot of women know that. So that was something that we had designed. Of course, you have to be conscious about what it means from a compensation and salary if you're going to be working less than what you used to. But it is something that I think should be talked about, right? Because it could be that, you know, I had done this at some point where I said, you know, I'm at a stage in my life where I cannot be a PM. It's just taking so much of this mental load. I want to actually take a step down and I want to work in this role. Is that a possibility? And in my company, I was thankful that my manager was able to guide me, but I didn't even know that that was an option. Sure, it impacted my salary, but for me at that point in time, failing as a PM was worse than actually making a few hundred, you know, bucks less, but thriving and being successful. So I think there's so many different things that companies can do, we can do, leaders can do. You, if you are a mom, knowing how you can have these conversations, and then of course the government.
Yes. And do you teach or tell this, you know, to the people who join the PMDojo or the company, you know, hiring PMs, you know, or your leader, you know, leadership friends and so on?
So when I do this in a few different ways. So, you know, this, if I'm coaching folks, like if I'm coaching product leaders and these topics do come up, like how do I support? I will share and brainstorm ideas. Sometimes the leader needs to initiate this cultural change in a company. And sometimes you are stuck within the constraints of a company that the company is not able to do that or doesn't want to do that, right? So that is also the reality. But yes, I will be working in partnership with a lot of leaders if I'm coaching them, and if I'm coaching a full-fledged at a company level, then these type of conversations may come up, like how do you create a culture where you can retain more minorities and working women so that you can support them as they're going through some of these. So these are some of the things that I will coach and train and advise if there is a need. It's not something that I go with an agenda, right? Because it's not up to me. At the end of the day, this needs to be a problem that needs to be solved. And for that, it needs to be, a problem within a company. Like I'm advising one company where we have women, but we don't have moms. I don't think I need to bring that up right now, but we are making some other changes out there to support a more, a space where different voices can be heard, right? So for example, in that particular company, there are a lot of folks who are not fully outright in meetings. So I'll give a very simple example. They've had meetings, and I've seen how meetings are run in that company. And basically, there are a few people who just dominate the conversation. Right? They're loud, they're very animated, they're very confident, very comfortable. English is their first language, totally get it. And then you have some other folks, maybe English is not their first language, maybe they're shy, maybe they need more time to think. And so if you run a meeting like this, then obviously none of their ideas are going to be ever taken, right? And so what I'm doing is when I'm working with them, I'm actually, bringing some of the methods from design thinking, such as how do you work together but alone? How do you do silent vote? How do you structure unstructured conversations? And so it's different. It's not for women, but it's for people with different personalities and different voices and different ways of working, where you can still create that environment where different ideas and diverse perspectives do come into the table. And that needs a little bit of coaching, because a lot of times people are not intentionally bad, but they want to sabotage someone else. But that's just how they have grown up. And culturally, that is how normal looks like. But it's not going to look normal in the world we live in right now, right? Which is so diverse.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. So yeah, we learned a lot about families, women in tech, so and how government and companies can help. So we'd like to apply those learnings into our companies as well. So this is kind of just a random question, but so how do you spend your daily life? So like from Sunday to Saturday, so how many hours are you spending with your family or your kids? Or how many hours are you working? So like on these days.
Oh my God.
Yeah. I want to know professionals' daily life.
Yeah. Okay. So Saturday, Sunday. I'll start with the easier bit. So I made a very big change 2 years ago, where I made a very conscious decision. I'm not going to work on Saturday and Sunday. I'm not 100% there yet. Stuff still comes up, and when you're a solo founder, sometimes there's going to be something, but I am going to do my level best where I'm not. So, like when I started PMDojo, I would actually, like one of my classes, like I would teach on Saturday mornings. And it would completely change the entire dynamic on the weekend with my family, right? Because then it meant that my husband had to take my son away so that there wasn't any disturbance. I had to teach, then I had to clean up the recording, then I had to share the recording. Then there would be questions like my week, like that just looked like 7 days. So 2 years ago, I made a very conscious decision and I said, Saturday, Sunday, I'm intentionally not going to work. Just that is. So I would say maybe I'm like 85% there. There'll still be some times that shows up, but I will never do an interview on the weekend. I'm never going to do a podcast. I'm never going to go on any networking event, even if it's like opens up millions of dollars for me. No, I will not. That is time for family. So Saturday, Sunday, the way it goes is we wake up. Obviously, we don't wake up anytime we want because we have a dog that is barking to go out and my son wanting breakfast. And usually Saturdays mean that we have some good breakfast, right? It's not the cereal and milk that happens on 5 days a week, right? So either French toast or something, or as we are walking, we'll just grab this really nice wrap place by Mark Zuckerberg's the initiative in Redwood City. So it's just very close. It's like just 5-7 minutes walk from where we live. So we'll typically grab that. We're gonna have some coffee. We'll take our dog to the park. So it's just family. Like that's how we set it up. And then of course, stuff gets busy then along the way. My son has piano classes, so like the regular family stuff. That might give maybe some time for my husband and I to just have coffee now, right? For that 45 minutes where you don't have to worry about anything. We also have this rule of not talking about our son during those 45 minutes. That's important. That was something he enforced because I couldn't stop not talking about him. Like, what is he doing now? Do you think he's playing well, or do you think blah blah blah? And he had this rule of not talking about our son, which I found very interesting. But we are starting to do that. And of course, lunch, and then evening time again, we've made this new family ritual that we're going to be exploring a new city. Yeah. And so we just go, and we explore a new city, and typically nature-wise. So because of a dog as well, I think that's something that we do. So that's our weekend. Sunday, we try to take it a little bit easy. It's a little bit of cooking, just very little bit of cooking that I might have to do, but it's usually just family. Monday to Friday, it's a totally different game because I'm responsible for school drop-offs. So my Monday mornings look crazy. I'm going to be very irritable a lot of the times because I am not a morning person, and here I'm having to kind of prepare everything, and I'm already kind of thinking about all of the work that is, but I cannot start my work until 10 o'clock in the morning because I drop him off, I walk back. I need a few minutes to kind of just, I think, get my headspace straight. So I think Monday to Friday stuff looks a little bit different, but usually what I do is I tend to not have any meetings in the morning because I need some headspace to think and do some deep strategy work, write. A lot of those things is something that I'm going to be doing, road mapping. I'm going to try to kind of think through some of those things in the morning, lunch, and then after that, I'm going to take some calls. The coaching calls will happen and things like that on most days. I'm not saying this is like perfect. And then in the evening, when my husband comes, thankfully he picks my son up unless there is a surprise where he says, I'm getting too late. Honey, can you please go and pick him up? Like what happened yesterday. So we do have surprises like that. And then I have to just drop everything and bring so it is haphazard. It is nothing like this 5 a.m. club where I have this ritual of writing a journal. No, I write my journal and I do a little bit of manifesting. It's something that I've always believed in. Like I'm going to write things down that I want to happen, as fuzzy and woody as it sounds, but I do that. Not like I want to become a billionaire, no, but I want to write things like, it could be a vacation. It could be something like, I would love to be able to solve this problem, and I have solved this problem, and this is what the to be is going to look like. I think that just gives me a little bit of space to articulate it in my mind with clarity as to whether I even understand the problem. And then what might be the next 1 or 2 steps that I might need to take in order to at least try to unpack that. Because a lot of time, these type of problems are so complex. It's like a bad knot. You don't even know what part you need to untangle. And so I think it's a very important exercise for me to figure some of those things out. And I do have a time slot in my calendar where I'm going to read a paper book. Call me old-fashioned. I like to smell paper, and I like to feel the paper. I like to underline. I like to put my Post-its. Things that I used to do in my early teens, I still do it in my 40s. I don't know why. My husband gets really mad that, in this little place, I have all of these books everywhere. And he's like, why can you not just get Kindle? And I'm like, I like paper books. And so I do have in my calendar where I'm going to read. I used to be able to read full book over the weekend before I became a mom. Now, what good looks like has changed drastically. Now, if I even read 1 page, I think I call it a success. So the definition of good has changed over the years. And then the evening dinner time, it's about a lot of we do roast porn conversation as a family, for my son, what has the day been? What is he grateful for? What was good? What is something that he would like to change? Where does he need help with? and it goes around the table. And so we ask the same question to myself and the same question to my husband. I think it's important for my son to understand where his parents come from and how the day goes. And of course, then after that, we just go for a family walk in the night with the dog again. So we live in Redwood City. It's pretty walkable in the Bay, unlike a lot of the parts of Bay Area. So in the night around 8 o'clock, we do like a full round of downtown Redwood City, come back. And then, yeah, it's like putting everyone to sleep. I might do another round of reading. I might map out my calendar. So it's that. And then, of course, when we go on little mini vacations, then days are different. So I don't know. I don't know. And then I try to fit in a gym here and there, but I am not very religious about it, unfortunately. So it's not something that I would recommend.
Really inspiring. And yeah, like on and off, yeah, matters. Yeah, at some point. And yeah, that's really great. And sorry,
I
forgot
wish
to
I
ask.
had a better story about my
No,
timetable.
no. It's great. Yeah, it's a great story. And sorry, I forgot to ask one thing about product manager, but nowadays AI is dominant, in the market, and people are using AI, ChatGPT for many things, and that can help our workflow and work and productivity. So how do you think AI impact the PM job or roles at company?
I think it impacts a lot. So I'll answer this in two areas. I think one, there is a lot of grunt work that is just a part and parcel of every job. And so also in product management, right? Example, writing requirements could be one. Analyzing a whole bunch of qualitative customer interviews and then making sense out of it. Looking at past data, like I've spent a lot of time over the years, because obviously we didn't have AI to do. You could clean up as much as you want and then put it on Excel or Google Sheet and then do pivot. Like it was hard, like unstructured data. And I've seen my PM struggle a lot. And so when you do a lot of that grunt work, it doesn't leave any space in your brain to actually do focused work. So I think that's where AI just is a powerhouse, where it can be your buddy, your ideation buddy, to help you with a lot of grunt work so that you can focus on being more strategic and thinking through and connecting the dots and doing all of this. However, and then you also have lots of tools, right? Like how do you prioritize, right? Like you can throw in things and you can ask your model, you can look at predicting, your customer behavior, right? Like if these many customers have done X, Y, Z, how might they do if we were to build this thing? Like there's so many different things that you could do just to kind of get a little bit more sense, as opposed to just pontificating and making like you can have better instinct now also with AI, right? I think the problem, just like every technology, is when you rely on technology like AI too much, that you think like you're basically taking whatever AI is giving you as face value and you're not using your brain to think. AI cannot critically think, at least as of now, right? And so I do see where this is something that I think PMs need to be very, very wary of. Because if you're just copying and pasting the output from, let's say, Gen AI, ChatGPT, or other AI tools, then I'm going to get into trouble for saying it. But then why do I need to hire someone and pay someone $240,000 to $250,000 per year if I can get this done by paying $20 a month? I should say this in a more articulate way so that people don't get offended. But essentially what I'm trying to say here is that the critical thinking bit cannot be outsourced to AI. You can use AI for a lot of the grunt work to make you more productive. You could ask it to say, hey, this is what I've done as a requirements. Are there any holes in my argument? That would be a fantastic way. But if you resort to AI to say, okay, this is what I want to do, give me that. I'm going to copy paste. I'm going to put it in the template that we have and then send it another way. That's where the problem is, because then you're not using it to critically think and find like where I can make it contextual for how it's going to work. So I think that is the piece that you have to be kind of really wary about. And then, of course, I think when you're trying to build products, you have to then think about, are there use cases that can be solved better, faster, um, with some of the latest technologies. And of course, we're talking about AI here. For a lot of the times, maybe your customers are going to care that it is AI, but for a lot of average users, they don't give two hoots whether the underlying technology is AI or not, right? I mean, how many of average users, when they are checking out their products on Amazon, actually care about whether the recommendation engine is built from AI or not? I'm talking about like really average on the consumer side. So I would say then as a PM, it becomes really important to think about, is there, because every single PM is being asked, is there an AI angle in our product? We have to, because competitors have it, like we need to. So then our job then becomes like, okay, what is the business as a business? What are the use cases? Is there a fit that a technology like AI can solve? What are the problems that our customers are having, our users are having? What are the different ways to solve it? Can I test whether something like this can be done using AI? Because the infrastructure for AI is so expensive and it has to be set up. Are we ready from a business standpoint before we just kind of go into the bandwagon? I think there's so many different things that as a PM, you have to be a good, exceptional PM before you become an AI PM, right? Like, I don't think, again, I know a lot of people talk about AI PM. I don't believe in AI PM. The products are AI enabled. You are still a product manager. You have to still be an exceptional good product manager before you really learn how to use any of the enabling technologies today or in tomorrow's world to then make critical decisions about how that problem can be solved using an underlying technology.
Yeah, totally makes sense. Not to outsource our critical thinking process. And yeah, and related to that, and do you have any advice for, our audience are aspiring product managers, immigrant founders, and women in tech sometimes. And do you have some other advice to those people? Like, in career-wise?
Yeah, so maybe I would say, like, if you're an aspiring PM, I would say number one advice would be learn how to filter out bullshit. Really important. I think a lot of people, like when I started back in the day in the field, there wasn't any information about product management. There wasn't anything. So I had a very different problem. Like I had to figure out because there wasn't anything. Now there is just everywhere. And so how do you know what is right advice that's going to help you and what is just anything that someone has just pulled out from ChatGPT? Because there are courses now that have been generated with ChatGPT. So I'm not saying that's wrong, but that may not be the best path for you if you're trying to transition into product, right? So I think build the BS filter. And as a PM, experienced PM, you also need that, right? You have to be able to filter signal from noise. I'm just saying it in a very frustrated way right now of having a BS filter. So I think that is really important. Know that if you really are passionate about this field, you can make the transition happen. It doesn't matter what your background is. So a lot of the times aspiring PMs will ask, well, I am an engineer. Can I become a product manager? I have never worked in tech. Can I become a product? Yes, you can. If you want to, and if you actually have that aptitude for being a PM, you might be miserable being a PM, right? So not everyone should get into product management. I also tell them that. So, if you do have the aptitude, if you do love the field, then I think a better question to ask is not, can I become a PM? It's like, what do I need to do to become a PM, right? So I think change your question and ask better questions. That's also a very good PM trait to have. If you're already a PM, then I would say your question, and I know for existing PMs, growing in your career and moving up is very important, especially because product teams are very small. So it's not like engineering teams. So the chances for moving up in the ladder is limited in product teams. So I think again, a better question to think about is how you're going to be framing your conversations for moving up, and what does moving up look like for you? So have that clear, and then spend some time thinking about how are you going to make that ask to your manager or within your leadership team, really understand how the talent management process happens in your company, both officially and unofficially. Don't just accept what the official policy says. A lot of the times, like people will tell me, well, yeah, I cannot get promoted until 12 months. And we start working together and bingo, they're in 6 months, they've already been put into the leadership track. So there's a written policy and then there's the unwritten. But it's very important to know what the policy is for talent management. But then more important is how do you have that conversation? A lot of the times, you go and ask your manager, well, I've done everything. Why am I not getting promoted? This is not a government job where tenure-based promotions are going to happen. It doesn't work like that. And so how do you make that ask is really, really important. And your job of managing up is to make sure that your manager also looks good. Unfortunately, like, it's as simple as that, right? It's a human decision at the end of the day. And so how do you have those conversations and don't leave it till the very end? That's too late. Then you're already looking at next year's promotion cycle. So I think this is where it's really, really important. Make it about the company also. It's not just about you. Why is the company going to benefit from promoting you? So these are some things that I would say to existing PMs. And then I think if you're a founder, I would share, it depends, what stage of founder you are. So I'm just going to maybe target folks who are maybe thinking about starting out, right? Or they just started working. I think a lot of times when I'm having conversations with founders, the two things that they're after is I need to go and hire an engineering team to build out the product. And the second thing that they're going to really be concerned about is I need to raise money. And my question every single time is, what do you know? What do you have to build? Have you tested it out? Do you have traction? Do you have users who are ready to open their wallet and pay for your idea? Because otherwise, you have spent money on something that's not going to bring money. So it's very important to validate your business model from day one. So that's one piece before you even hire your engineers, right? You can do a lot of things from building that first version. So that's one. And why do you need to raise? It's my first question. Like, why do you need to raise? Even if you go to raise, they're going to be asking to see traction. How are you going to show traction? So I think, and I always tell people, I'm like, if you want to go raise VC money, have you watched the Shark Tank? They're like, no. And I'm like, can you please go and watch and just see even a couple of episodes and come and tell me what is the first or the second question the sharks ask? And then let's talk about whether you need to raise money. Not everyone needs to raise money, but I think as a society, we celebrate and think that you're successful if you've raised X millions of dollars. That is a validation, of course, but I don't think that's a measure of success. Not every company needs to be VC backed. And just because you haven't raised a VC backed company doesn't mean that you're not serious and you're not ambitious enough. I think there's a lot of courage in being customer funded, right? You're going to make different types of decisions. So I think it again depends on your why. Why do you want to start a business? Why do you want to start? And if raising VC is the right path for you, then raise. Don't start with hiring this and spending more money before you've even earned $1.
Totally makes sense and really, really insightful advice and thank you. Yeah. Thank you. So yeah, this is the last question, by the way. So, as Glasp is a platform where people share what they are reading, learning as their digital legacy, we see that, as digital legacy, and we want to know what legacy or impact do you want to leave behind for future generations or other people. So it's a big question.
It's a very big question. It's a very, very big question. Strangely enough, I used to ask this question before joining a company. Don't ask me why. Don't ask me why. But it is a question I've often asked. It was a question that I asked my first job in a startup. And I don't know, I think the word legacy was something that was used a lot in my family growing up. And actually my maternal granddad used to talk about this a lot, right? The legacy of so-and-so and the legacy of so-and-so. And I just loved the stories growing up with my grandfather. He was a really good storyteller. Mundane things, but he would say it in a way that I remember even, to this day. And I lost him when I was still very young, but I remember the stories. And so I think for whatever reason, I have asked this question, and I think, earlier in my career, legacy meant very different. As I grew in my career, legacy meant totally different. Now legacy means different. So as an example, for me, legacy could mean, is it something where I can, if I were to leave this company after whatever number of years, would I leave it in a better place, right? Or could I make even a small minutia change in how this company works where people will remember? Or can I create some resources that the company is going to still use after I leave, the sustainable living resources? Could it be something where I make it better for maybe women, who come after me in this company? So I think over the years, for me, legacy has meant different things. And plainly speaking, it just means if I've left that company, I haven't thought about death when I was, young. But if I were to leave this company, how would people remember me, and how would I like to be remembered? Would I like to be remembered as this jerk that no one wanted to work with? Or would I be remembered as someone who went out of their way to create space for other people to feel like they belonged and that we could together solve the hardest problem, smiling, laughing, and having fun? That's how I've thought about legacy for a big part of my career. I think after becoming a mom, my definition and understanding of legacy started changing a lot, and I think it became more deeper, at least how I'm thinking. For some people, it may not be deep, and it's like, gee, that's so superficial. But I think for me, I started thinking about it very differently. And so, for me, my criteria was like, if I have to leave my kiddo and be in a company or work, then it better be worth it. So the problem has to be more messier. And so as I started getting more senior in the executive room, I would intentionally choose companies with a lot of red flags, which is so counterintuitive, because in my mind, the harder, the messier the problem, I could leave a stronger legacy. I had the chance to leave a stronger legacy, right? Usually people say if it's red flags, don't join, right? But for me, I think I took it as like, okay, I may be able to change and make it a tad bit better and leave it at a better place than when I had joined. So I think that was something that I looked at as I became more senior and in the executive room. And I think now when I think about it, I want to say that I want my legacy to be like, I want to be remembered as someone who changed the tech industry in just even a little bit, where we created a more equal footing for people who don't have all of the privileges than, let's say, the majority of the folks. If it's for women, I want them to never feel like they don't belong, and never want them to feel like they have to over-explain. If it's a minority or someone who hasn't grown up here and maybe the first generation, like a lot of folks who come here to study, I don't want you to think that just because you have an accent, you are somehow less than someone else, right? I think everybody has an accent, right? Like, I mean, English has an accent, people from different parts of US have an accent. So I think everybody has an accent. Just because we sound different doesn't mean that we're not smart enough, or we don't have the potential to do that. I also feel like, I think these days I'm thinking a lot about, how do I want to raise my son, and what do I want to be remembered as? Like, I want to be remembered as a good mom, good friend to my husband. I want to be remembered as a good friend, someone who built a community to bring people together, where people could problem solve and dream bold things and make it happen. And I also want my legacy to be as someone who is helping everybody around her to raise children, sons, daughters, to understand that they need to see women as equal. So I know I've said a lot of different things, but I think over the years, my definition of legacy and how do I want to be remembered has kind of changed. But for me, I think I just want to make even a small difference. And for me, that is important, whatever that small difference is. I cannot be sending rocket ships to Mars. I cannot do that. I don't have the means for doing that. But if I can change even one team, one company, if I can help one person who wanted to give up and help them see a different light, then I think I will be happy and fulfilled.
Yeah, that's a really beautiful answer. And thank you so much for answering.
Thank you.
And also thank you so much for joining today. And I really enjoyed the conversation
you.
and learned a
Thank
lot.
you. Thank you.